Thanks for joining. This is our first call to kick off the upgrade of MANDEL. We'll share our experiences with our previous consensus upgrade, a 1.8 upgrade. What's the code status? Is it going to be 2.3 and 3.0 or a 3.1? That sort of thing. How will we test and what's the strategy? How will we communicate? And then roles and responsibilities.
And so we're calling it the MANDEL release. It is a placeholder name. The name really doesn't matter. The release itself is not necessarily time sensitive. There's no imminent, urgent technical requirement for us to do an upgrade at this time. Whether it updates on May 19th, May 20th, on June 1st, on July 2nd, on April 4th, there is no difference at this time. So part of what the idea behind this is to coordinate, because we haven't done so in quite some time, coordinate during a period of time where we don't necessarily have time pressures, so that when in the future we do want to do more frequent and more relevant updates, and or should there be an actual pressing need to do an update, that we have the processes in place, the communication strategies in place, essentially the contacts for those that are relevant in place, that we've got the documentation, the standard operating procedures. And so part of this upgrade, the idea behind it is to set all that foundation so that in the future, when we'll want to do more frequent updates and more important updates as EOS.io Plus working group stands up and that becomes more of a formal entity, that we will have essentially done a practice run under very much test conditions with very little outside pressures to do so. Right now, I'm leaning towards advocating for a few different things. So the way that it's being set up, or the way that it has been set up right now, we've got 2.0, so EOS.io 2.0, which is becoming MANDEL 3.0. We have the release candidate 1 right now. And EOS.io 2.1 is becoming MANDEL 2.3. I am currently in talks with Dan and with other core developer teams to see whether or not changing that so that we wait a little bit longer. So to see what the cost is in terms of time, but actual resource costs as well. So that instead of proceeding with 2 separate versions of EOS.io and whatever EOS.io will be called in the future, that we perhaps add a little bit of time and we move towards a common 3.1 at the onset instead of doing 2 separate versions. This has a few benefits, and it'll also give a little bit more time, depending on what the cost is, to add a few functional features. One of the main drivers for this update is to essentially move away from the current repo that is owned by Block One to the community-owned repo, which right now is in the hands of the ENF as a placeholder, but that will eventually fall in the hands of whatever the entity that leads EOS.io Plus will become. One of the extra features that we're looking at adding and we're in talks with is stemming from the API Plus Blue Paper. Should be released on, give or take, February 24th, but the English version is pretty much done at this point. It's just finalizing and it's being sent to translation, but I already have access to it. The teams have been already working on this for a few months. One of the features that's in there that would be useful, likely to be able to bundle in this potential 3.1 release instead of the 2.3 and 3.0 would be API transaction lifecycle upgrades. And so I'm looking at whether or not it would be feasible to do 3.1 to add API transaction lifecycle in there, which would add a direct benefit to certain stakeholders within the ecosystem. And it would also satisfy the need of being able to showcase that we're no longer running the Block One repo. So it doesn't even need to be a hard fork. When we talk about the hard fork, it's because we'd be enabling certain functions which would require people to upgrade. However, some of those functions we haven't deemed it necessary up until this stage. It wouldn't necessarily fulfill that requirement of showcasing that we're not running the Block One repo, because those functions currently exist in 2.0 or 2.1. And so we could potentially continue pointing to the Block One repo, turn those on. It wouldn't necessarily showcase that we're running our own. However, if we add the API transaction lifecycle improvements and those functions are functional on whatever version that we're running, let's assume it's 3.1, it would inevitably showcase that we're not running the Block One repo without necessarily having to do a hard fork. The advantage of that is that we'd be able to buy a little bit more time to be able to put into 3.1, to be able to add those improvements, as well as then having a new function that's there by a certain date, depending on the time that would be, still getting our opportunity as well to re-exercise the muscle of going through a large upgrade like this without necessarily enabling the hard fork functions, let's say by the end of June or early July or something like that, and then only enabling those hard functions later on And so again, it would buy us a little bit more time. It would fulfill part of the business requirements. It would fulfill part of the technical requirements as to why we would do the update. And it would fulfill a few of the other, I guess, checklist items that are a little bit less tangible in terms of branding, marketing, investor confidence, signaling to the market that we're no longer associated to block one, those type of things. So that's where I'm leading right now. I'm looking at what the costs are in terms of time and actual resources. There are a few teams that are helping out on this in terms of core developer teams, in terms of management, in terms of being able to actually write the code and such. And so I'll be able to provide updates as we go week by week, being very upfront as early as possible. I'm leaning towards doing that instead of doing a May 19th release of 2.3 and 3.0. Having said that, if the costs are too high, I may advocate for going to the 2.3 and 3.0, which is the current approach. And I do believe that we're able to meet those timelines. We have roughly 3 months from now before that date, and whether it's that date or a few days before or after, again, it's somewhat irrelevant. But we are capable of pulling off this upgrade. There are very few extra features within that code, and so it's really not the same thing as what we did with 1.8 when there were tons of new features, and so there was a lot of testing required. It's essentially features that we already have in 2.0 and 2.1. And we're simply porting them over. So it's actually somewhat easier. And there seems to be a renewed interest, especially in the West anyways, by looking at the people on this call to be able to help coordinate. Last time around in September of 2019, a lot of the people that I see in the chat here weren't there at that time. When Daniel and I were hosting these calls, especially for the first ones, it was him and I and maybe Michael from EOS USA. So I had maybe 3 people on the call for the first couple of calls. So having said that, if we have to, and if it's deemed to be better, then I'll advocate for the current approach. If not, depending on the cost, I'll advocate for the slightly lengthier approach, but with more benefits to all stakeholders within a reasonable amount of time.
We are now a business network. We need to serve business customers. We're no longer, 3 years ago, we were BP mostly network. Now it is a business network. We have a bunch of exchanges, a few applications are still running on EOS. So we need to serve them. The goal of the whole upgrade should be to serve customers, not just upgrade software because we want to. Yeah, we need to address the interest of the customers, first of all.
Yeah, I agree. Good point. Thank you, Stan. Our main objective here is not to upgrade to MANDEL, but it's to create the system that enables EOS to upgrade frequently. The ENF has expressed a goal to have quarterly upgrades on EOS at some point. Stan's point about making sure this is like customer focused is a good one. One of my key results is related to kind of avoiding unexpected service disruptions for exchanges and applications. We're not going to be able to talk to every single exchange and app. We can at least target over X daily volume and then hope that captures the majority. So as Yves mentioned, when we started having the kickoff calls for the 1.8 upgrade, it was a pretty small group, sort of slowly grew the attention over time and had more people join as we went. A lot of the work we did was asynchronous. So I imagine the same thing will happen this time. I imagine I'll be doing a lot of coordinating with the block producers. But the high level steps were when we started the outreach, we already had everything on Jungle and Kylan. So we began by testing the 1.8 features on both Kylan and Jungle. Once we were confident that the features were working as expected, we upgraded the BP nodes to 1.8 without activating the features, and then began the process of assisting developers and exchanges for them to upgrade their nodes. Once we had some more understanding of how much time those stakeholders would need to do the upgrade, that's when we set the activation date and communicated it broadly. And then finally, we activated those 1.8 features when we had good, strong confidence that the majority of impacted stakeholders were ready. If I recall correctly, we were pretty successful. I think there was maybe just one exchange that was not upgraded. And so there was some disruption to service for that exchange. We know that from the time that we publicly announced and we had everything on test nets, it took us 2 months to launch 1.8. Okay, so we've clarified the code strategy as much as we can at this time. Testnet is the next big one. So the question came up, are we going to reset Jungle?
Yeah, we're going to keep running Jungle 3 because there are lots of devs testing stuff there. So there will be a Jungle 4.
Great. So we'll have Jungle 3 continue operating as it is and a fresh new Jungle 4. Does it make sense to start testing, for example, 2.3 and 3.0 now, or would we be waiting for 3.1 if that is the path we take?
So I would propose that we start Jungle 4 with the block 1 code, basically to the 2.0, latest 2.0 release, and then start upgrading the nodes to Mandel 3.0, see how they behave, how smoothly the upgrade goes, how it handles the data. Eventually, as soon as 3.1 is ready, we will upgrade that too. And then we need to test the consensus upgrade finally and make sure that all systems are ready. This consensus upgrade also brings some changes in state history. That means Period needs update, Chronicle needs update, a few other systems might also need update, like Atomic Assets API, for example.
And we need to know how the ship nodes itself will behave when upgrading.
Well, really, there are two separate upgrades. So upgrading to 3.1, should that be the route, can occur much before, the consensus upgrade. So everybody on the network, potentially, if the timelines are okay, could be running 3.1 by end of June, mid-July, something like early July. The consensus upgrade afterwards of the functions that require the consensus upgrade, that could be maybe 2 months later or so.
Do we know if, for example, we will need a full reindex or replay for the state history nodes? We don't know yet.
As far as I know, it's not required. So 3.0 has already changes in state history format, and they are not intrusive. So you don't need to, basically, as soon as you upgrade your node, it will start writing new types of data. But it is not requiring you to re-index.
And the past data will still work if you request.
Yes, it's backward compatible. Yeah.
Okay.
And the approach that Stan suggested, I concur with. So we would do the 2.0 to 3.0 on Jungle 4, and then eventually 3.1, and then eventually turning on some of those hard fork features should we deem them to be necessary. They don't necessarily need to be turned on if we don't believe that they actually bring any value. Currently, they're not turned on because we don't deem them to have any value. Part of the idea with the hard fork side of things was in order to showcase that we were not running the block 1 code anymore. However, if we do have API transaction lifecycles, then we don't need necessarily to do a hard fork. We would just have that function, which is a soft fork in 3.1 without ever having to do a hard fork, still meeting that requirement of showcasing that we're not running the block 1 code repo.
We still need to
separate things.
We need to still test the hard fork, maybe on a smaller test net, just to have all compatibility checks, because it will break compatibility. So we need software upgrades on all peripheral systems.
And just doing that muscle practice anyways, because likely by the end of the year, we would have EOS IO Plus that would have certain functions that would require consensus upgrade. For example, sub-second finality is one of the things that is being worked on. Also, so again, this is a test environment that we'll be able to run, but in a live format.
We'll have eventually probably several test nets. Jungle as a, let's say, primary public test net for everyone to try their stuff, but also a few other smaller test nets for particular use case, test scenario, and upgrade scenario. Kalin is basically designed to be more stable, right? So Kalin is for pre-production tests. For example, Upland is doing all pre-production tests on Kalin. So
Kalin is typically the mirror of the mainnet, whereas Jungle is the one that has all features activated in order to stress test the actual function.
But Power Up is not activated on Kalin as far as I know. So it's kind of behind already. But yeah, we need to address Kalin as well. Kalin should reflect the current EOS mainnet.
I heard you suggested that we deploy the Jungle 4 with a B1's 2.0 was what you suggested?
Initially with block 1's 2.0 and then upgraded to Mandel 3.0 and eventually Mandel 3.1.
2.0 13, right? The same one as mainnet.
Latest release 2.0. So we took a major release now.
Then from 2.0 we upgrade to 3.0. What about the 2.3? Are we doing any testing simultaneously with that, or we're assuming in this case final state is 3.1, so we're just going to bypass?
We don't know that yet, though. So I think we do need to throw 2.3 API nodes in with it and have them tested against the 3.0 as API nodes, the MANDEL 2.3 nodes in the same test net just like they'll work in production.
2.1 is a continuation of Block 1's 2.1.
2.3.
So 2.3, 2.3 of Fractally is a continuation of 2.1 of Block 1.
Correct.
So it's basically a Jungle 3 that could run 2.3 code and use that for testing. I'm still not convinced we ever need 2.3 because it also costs resources on all sides to
test.
Test and maintain one more branch of software, which will be basically dead at some point.
Yeah, but you can't run the defuse code unless you have Mandel 2.3. So there are clients and stuff that run off the API nodes today that will all of a sudden break. So we would upgrade this. Let's say we don't go to 3.1 right away. We would upgrade to Mandel 3.0. And if we don't bring 2.3 along in the test net to test it all and everything for the upgrade, when we converted the mainnet from Block 1's 2.0/2.1 to just Mandel 3.0, we would break stuff like the defuse code.
My suggestion would be to address those compatibility issues in Mandel 3.something instead of trying to maintain 2.3. Because 2.3 is a dead end branch, right? It will not be.
It'll depend what the cost is and how long in terms of time.
We can't be sure when that will be done. So we have to have a contingency plan that says,
correct.
My opinion, it's not, this doesn't have to be right, that the Jungle 4 would have Mandel 3.0 in it and Mandel 2.3 API nodes in it, so that we're testing what the upgrade for the mainnet will look like with the real code. If we then get the 3.1 code, then I would suggest, then we switch the strategy, but we don't have an answer on that, and we may not have an answer on that for weeks. So meanwhile, 3.0 is ready to go into Jungle 4 now. We could start working on it versus waiting and then finding out, we wasted weeks because that's the direction we're going to need to go anyway. No, I want you to know, I fully agree we should go straight to 3.1. It's a matter of logistics and costs and timing. We're not getting people stepping up saying, hey, we want to do that merge and we can do it cheaply and quickly.
Yeah. And basically 2.1 from Block 1 is quite a stable software. You're not forced to upgrade until there's consensus in compatibility. So 2.1 that is used by customers can be kept used. For the next half a year, it will be usable anyway.
So you're saying release Mandel 3.0 and Block 1's 2.1, not Mandel 2.3?
Well, Mandel 2.3 is it's a dead end, right? So this branch will not be developed further than 2.3.
Correct.
It costs time and money to develop, to test, to release, and to maintain. Maybe we can skip it. I don't know if we can, but if we can, that would be awesome to actually spare the resources.
I mean, are you suggesting that we run Mandel 3.0 with Block 1's 2.1 API nodes and do the upgrade that way and wait for Mandel 3.1 to knock out? And don't even, because then we can save money by not even porting Block 1 2.1, Block 1's 2.1, Block 1's 2.1 to Mandel 2.3. But that is right now underway and we're paying for it, right? We're paying to have 2.3 upgraded so that we would eventually be running mainnet with 3.0 and 2.3 together. And so if that is the goal, and I'm happy that we can revisit that, but if that is the goal, I would think we'd need Jungle 4 to run what mainnet's going to run, which would be a combo of Mandel 3.0 and 2.3 API nodes.
We still need to run the analysis basically to around on who is actually using 2.1 and how they're using and what features that they're using will be and how soon available in 3.1. And then we decide basically if 2.3 makes sense at all or not. What I see now, it makes kind of little sense, but I mean, it's my rough feeling. It
doesn't make sense from a tech point of view. There are variables that are non-tech related that are less tangible that make this upgrade important, that were the main drivers for going in this direction with Mandel release. What I'm trying to do is align those variables alongside the tech requirements that you are clearly focused on, but it's not all about the tech. And so I'm trying to align those, but it's not all about the tech.
We are running continuous, it's the business continuity anyway, right? So old nodes will be still running for some time, for at least next 6 months. You don't need to upgrade the node. If you run 2.0, 2.1, you can keep running them without problems. But as soon as there's consensus upgrade, all nodes need to be updated to a compatible version.
The consensus upgrade side of things is only to showcase, or a big part is to showcase that we're not running the block one repo. That may not be required if we're able to add API transaction lifecycles, which would fulfill that requirement without doing a consensus upgrade.
There's EVM coming, right? So, and yeah, there are some good things that are coming with this MANDEL branch, which might be required sooner than we expect. This is one of the aspects, right? So we have several aspects. We have political aspect, we have technical aspect, and we have 2 branches potentially to maintain. All these points need to be analyzed, and all pros and cons. And basically, as soon as we have a strategy, in the end, we should also not be too confusing for node operators like exchanges and applications.
I think the issue, Stan, is that right now, we're trying to hedge both strategies until we can get clarity on which one is going to be, and whether we can pull 3.1 off directly. So we kind of have to plan 2 paths so that we're not just waiting, because waiting would be wasted time. So we're kind of planning 2 paths in parallel, hoping that we can do 3.1. Eve knows that's my strong opinion, that we should just go straight to 3.1 with a merged code base. But if for numerous reasons we can't pull that off, then we at least have to have a plan in our pocket that we can get to running 3.0 with 2.3 at the same time. And so I know it's wasteful that we're doing double planning, but at least it's allowing us to make forward progress until we know that data.
Launching Jungle 4 with MANDEL 3.0, or whatever MANDEL is at now, right? So now it's 3.0 release candidates. Soon they will be released, and then we'll start working on new features for 3.1. We need to have Jungle 4 with all that code available so that people can also test. All compatibility tests should be available. So far.
Do we know when Jungle 4? So is I know there's a couple of Crypto Lions guys on the call. Thank you. Do we know when Jungle 4 will get spun up with the MANDEL 3? Because the 3.0 code was released. Do we have any kind of timeline on when we see MANDEL 3.0 will come up under Jungle 4?
It hasn't been decided yet because we were not sure which path to take, and it's still undecided.
So currently it's still unknown whether we take the 3.1 path or the 2.3 plus 3.0 path. What would the 3.1 path look like? I heard, we would start with 2.0. Does that make sense to everyone, or would we go straight to 3.0?
I like the 2.0 and upgrading to 3.0.
You need to start 2.0 because you need to run that test of upgrading from 2 to 3.
Okay.
I agree with that.
And then assuming so this is no longer relevant in this path because this is the 3.1 path. And I heard that 2.3 could be tested on Jungle 3. Would that be?
I'm debating that a little bit, and Stan knows way more than I do, but I think if we're going to be testing in the 2.3 plus 3.0, the eventual mainnet will run that. And so if we're testing in Jungle 4, which would be a proxy to what mainnet would be, I would say we would test 2.3 in Jungle 4 we would add it in. Here's my proposal. We would launch MANDEL 3 in Jungle 4 right away. And when Dan releases the 2.3 code, we're only testing it as API nodes, and we add it into Jungle 4 as API nodes, run the defuse code against it and stuff. See, we didn't break anything. And so we know we're running a 3.0, 2.3 hybrid in mainnet when they upgrade, and we did the same thing. And I would start by putting the way, in my opinion, I would do it is I'd start by putting some block 1, 2.1 nodes there and upgrade them to MANDEL 2.3, all in Jungle 4. All of that would be done in Jungle 4 so that you replicated what the block producers will be doing that are running either 2.0 or 2.1 nodes as they move forward into MANDEL.
Keep in mind, we also have Kylene that we can leverage, and that's how we used to do it as well before, so that we have 2 potential test nets running in parallel that can be used for different tests.
Typically what we've done is the bleeding edge stuff happens on Jungle, and then we tried to do on Kylan the same process that we would do on mainnet. So we're a little more open to breaking stuff on Jungle. And then once it's tested, we kind of follow the same activation plan on Kylan that we would for mainnet.
I just think that 2.3, because it's going to be an API node of what should be a Mandel 3 blockchain, that's why I think you should test it on Jungle 4. And then if we want to do a second rev of like a whole upgrade directly in Kylan, that's fine. It's just that's why I'm hesitant to say we should test 2.3 in Jungle 3, because Jungle 3 won't be running Mandel 3.0 block producers.
Does anyone disagree with that? That we should test API nodes?
That approach.
Jungle 3 path, Jungle 4 path, and Kylan path. Basically, we have 3 test nets. Each of them needs to have a plan.
What I would do for clarity, Daniel, is I would say upgrade, down in your second and third bullet under 2.3 and 3.0, I would say upgrade B1 2.0 BPs to Mandel 3.0, and then upgrade B1 2.1, and then down in the one below, it'd be upgrade B1 for the API nodes, upgrade B1 2.1 API nodes to 2.3.
Yeah.
And then same thing in front of the BP nodes for 3.0, B1 2.0.
2.0.
Yeah. So then people are kind of like, oh, okay, they're being very explicit, very literal.
And Stan, going to your feedback, either of these could happen on either of the test nets, depending on what path we choose. Right now, the uncertainty is whether we're going to be going with either path. They would happen, in my understanding, on the same test nets, wouldn't they? Or are we going to be creating...
Basically, all these versions are compatible between each other, except that Jungle 3 is running features from 2.1, so it cannot run anything that is not backward compatible with 2.0. I mean, we are free to test all kinds of branches on 2.0 networks, which will be Jungle 4 in the beginning.
So whatever path we take, upgrading Jungle 4 or launching Jungle 4 with 2.0 is the same. We can start that process. It doesn't matter if we know which path we're on. The second, upgrading B1 2.0 BPs to Mandel 3.0, doesn't matter. We can start that process. And then when it gets time to upgrading the APIs, that's when we have to stop and ask ourselves, okay, are we going, what's the path?
Well, actually, Daniel, for the 3.1 path, you wouldn't, in my opinion, you wouldn't upgrade to 3.0. You'd upgrade straight to 3.1.
3.1?
Yes, because the 3.0 will have been basically a throwaway release that we would never run or use. It was just used as the merge point for 3.0 and 2.3. And no one would ever run 3.0 or 2.3. Those would just be had been done as ports, and then there's a merge. And so no one should bother going through these ports unless you're going to actually run them for a period of time. So they'll just be predecessors to the merge.
Okay.
In my opinion.
I tend to disagree, because 3.0 has already new features. They are not consensus. Some of them are consensus breaking, but there's a number of API features which are already imported in 3.0. So
you're going to make testing so much longer. I mean, you're going to have to test 3.1 end to end anyway. And so why not? And you're going to probably take mainnet. I would recommend you take mainnet from 2.0 directly to 3.1, not from 2.0 to 3.0 to 3.1. So if 3.1 is the merge of 3.0 and 2.3, you should be taking the mainnet from 2.0 directly to 3.1. And therefore, I mean, we paid for it already, but 3.0 in my mind is just a port and some added features that got thrown in. And the merge makes it where you do a single upgrade, and we'll test that and test the hell out of that in Jungle 4. But you don't want to make mainnet go through 2 upgrades if you can just go through 1 from 2.0 directly to 3.1.
Yes, the reason why you're doing 2 is just to test in case the 3.1 approach doesn't work. So you wouldn't go to 2.0. If 3.1 is the direction that we're taking, you wouldn't do 2 to 3 to 3.1. 3 wouldn't exist in that case. It'd be irrelevant.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Yes.
Sure. So
yes.
Are we then comfortable? That means we need to have that question answered on which path we're taking before we launch Jungle 4 on 2.0. Are we okay waiting a couple of weeks to get that answer before we take the next step?
That's probably Stan's point. And I see the point now. We could at least be testing the features in 3.0 and getting familiar with them, because they are going to live in 3.1. And all it does is it makes it where we can delay the decision point. But then when the merge comes, we would, in my opinion, just so everyone knows, here's my opinion now for 3.1. Let's say we do go to 3.1. So I'm going to go back and agree with Stan and say we would upgrade them to 3.0. So we start testing right away. Then when 3.1 comes, we wipe Jungle completely and do the same line and do the B.1 2.0 BPs to 3.0. We don't go Mandel 3.0 to 3.1. We now start upgrading B1 2.0 BPs to Mandel 3.1. That would be the following line, because we have learned a lot from what happened in 3.0, which code will live in 3.1, but we didn't wait for 3.1 to start to do the testing. So, I mean, it means we're going to do more in the testing environment, but we're not going to cause that to happen to mainnet. Mainnet will just go right from 2.0 to 3.1.